Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're doing the Orwell books tier list. We're doing his 9 full-length books, so that's 3 non-fiction books and 6 novels. We're not doing any of the various collections of essays and poetry and pamphlets and stuff like that. We're just concentrating on his full-length books. I haven't reread any of these books for this video, so some of these books I've read a few years back, some of them more recently. Some of them I've read more than once, some I haven't. Okay, let's crack on. So the first book is A Clergyman's Daughter, and my understanding is Orwell wasn't that keen on this book. I think he only really said, go ahead and publish it if it's just to give my heirs a bit of money after I die. I don't think he considered it a great work, but I don't really understand that because I think it's amazing. It deals with poverty and lower classes at the early part of the 20th century. You learn a lot about hot picking in Kent, life on the streets of London, homelessness. You learn about the teachers, the treatment of teachers and children in private schools. It's just a really fascinating insight into that period of time and that life. There's a few flaws with it. There's a whole memory loss thing which isn't really explained that well, and there's like a weird section that's written as a play which is quite cringe, to be fair. But I'm still going to put it in a solid A. It's a really good book. Okay, next up. Animal Farm. Well, what can you say about Animal Farm? Obviously, it's probably Orwell's second most famous book. It's really difficult with Orwell when you're doing a tier list to know where to put 1984 and Animal Farm because they're just so much more famous and well-read than the others, so you've got to wonder how much that's going to influence your opinion. But I think they aren't his best works. They're good. They're definitely good. And Animal Farm is good, but there's better books. But Animal Farm is really interesting. It's simple to read. The points, you can understand the points easily. It's a fun story. I enjoyed reading it. It's a nice, solid book. It's not a long book. It's solid. It's easy to read, but it's definitely not Orwell's best book. So I'm going to put it in the B tier, solid B. Okay, next up, Burmese Days. I absolutely love Burmese Days. So this is one of Orwell's books where it is a novel, but it features a policeman in Burma, and Orwell was a policeman in Burma, so you can imagine that a lot of what happens in the novel is actually true and based on his experiences out in Burma. It's his only book that kind of deals with race. Most of his books deal with class and society. This one, it does deal with that because it's based in the Raj and the old empire days, but it also deals with race, which is quite interesting. And I like that part of the world, so for me it's even more fascinating. It's definitely an A tier, and I'm going to place it above A Clergyman's Daughter, just because I did mention there's a few cringe bits in Clergyman's Daughter. And I think Burmese Days, overall, the story was better. Clergyman's Daughter is a really interesting insight, but the actual story and the twists and turns of the story are better in Burmese Days. Okay, next. Coming up for Air. So this is a weird one. I don't think it's his strongest book at all. There's nothing megally wrong with it. It just goes on a bit, to be fair. The main character is set just before World War II, and like a lot of Orwell's work, it's a good predictor. It definitely he definitely can see what's going to come with World War II, but I assume a lot of people could at that time. The main character is trying to get back to the past, which I suppose it just reminds you that throughout all periods of time, people always have a certain nostalgia for a past that probably didn't really exist. It does go on a bit though. The detail it describes the past in, although it's kind of interesting, it does drag a little bit for me. And even though the story, the actual plot, I don't think they are that important in most books. If like it's written well, it doesn't really matter too much how intricate the plot is. But this didn't really go anywhere. Like a lot of Orwell's books, it's the main characters, they try and solve a problem and they find out they can't solve it and then just carry on as normal. So that's pretty much how this one goes. But I'm going to place this quite low just because it did drag a bit for me. I'm going to put it in the e-column. I wouldn't really recommend that book, to be fair. Okay. Next book, Down and Out in Paris and London. Straight up, Orwell's best book, S column, without a doubt. This is by far and away Orwell's best book. If you don't know it, just go and read it. Can't recommend this one enough. So Orwell was down and out in Paris and London when he wrote this. It's all true. It's based on true stuff. Half of it's, he's a waiter in Paris. He works in the hotels. He goes to London. He tramps around with all the tramps. They stay in the Spike, which is essentially like disused prisons. It's just absolutely amazing insight to what life was like in that period. I guess the only slightly negative thing I would say about it is, probably a couple of letters, and Orwell could have got himself out of that situation. So even though he was in that situation for a long time and genuinely experiencing it, and it wasn't like he was nipping off for a cup of coffee or a beer at the end of the day and writing up his notes, he was living that life for, whatever, for the months, what it was, but, he could have ended it if he so chose to. But even so, it's fascinating, it's amazing, it's well written. Like all good books, it's easy to read, it's not complicated. So yeah, definitely strong S. It's by far and away his best book. Okay, Homage to Catalonia. Well, again, this is kind of similar vein to Down and Out when it's true. So this time George Orwell went to fight the fascists in Spain. So it's about the Spanish Civil War and it's all true. And, you really, after reading Down and Out, then obviously you're really hyped about this book. Well, I was. Unfortunately, though, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. I don't know, it just wasn't as well written. It wasn't so interesting. The descriptions weren't as good. I think before I'd read it, I just read some Hemingway stuff like For Whom the Bell Tolls, which obviously also features the Spanish Civil War, and that's just far, far, far superior. I mean, Hemingway is like one of the ultimate war writers, so maybe that's why my opinion of it was a bit tainted. But I don't think it's his strongest work. It's okay. It's just not. It's not his strongest. It's a bit disappointing, to be fair. It does show another side to Orwell. He kind of really seemed to want to kill someone in it. He really seemed to not just defend himself, but he just really wanted to go out of his way to kill a fascist, which is just quite interesting. But other than that, I do want to reread it. Maybe my opinion will change, but for now I'm going to drop it in C column. Definitely not his strongest book, and I would definitely recommend those books in the A&S for anyone that has read Animal Farm or 1984 and wants to read something else. Okay, next up, Keep the Aspidistra Flying. This one is really good. I'm telling you now, it's going to go in A before Burmese Days. It's like strong A. Again, like I mentioned before, like a lot of Orwell's books, someone tries to overcome a problem. They do their best, and in the end, they just go back to where they started. They can't fight this thing. In this book, I think this must be, although it is a novel, I think it must be a lot to do with what Orwell was feeling. So the guy's a writer. He's a socialist. He really wants to live on the breadline and live in poverty. He doesn't want to sell his soul. His partner wants him to take a job in an advertising agency. He doesn't agree with it. So as soon as he gets money, he just spends it all. But then he's depressed because he hasn't got any money. There's such a lot of conflict going on in there. It's really well written. It's a fascinating book. Very, very interesting. Okay, 1984. Straight away, I'm going to put this in B. I do think those other four books are better. I'm going to put it above Animal Farm. It is slightly better than Animal Farm. If I can get it in, there we go. I mean, this is so famous. It's hard to know whether it is genuinely his best book or whether it's, because it is different to all the other books. I mean, it is the only one that's set. Well, apart from Animal Farm, obviously, it's the only one that's kind of set for the future from where he was, and obviously we can say a lot of it's come true, but essentially it's a fantasy book, so it is kind of different to his other books. I like it. I think a lot of to me it's a love story at the end of the day. It's set in this fascinating place, and obviously people say a lot of what he was talking about is coming true, but at the end of the day, it's a love story. But yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it is so famous, but I don't know whether it deserves to be right at the top, because I do think these other ones we put at the top there are superior works. I think they are better. Okay, Road to Wigan Pier. So, A Clergyman's Daughter, obviously that's amazing. It deals with like poverty in the past, as does Down and Out in Paris in London. So you would hope A Road to Wigan Pier does that. And the first little bit of the book is great. It's talking about the mining communities and the industrial communities in north and northeast of England, and it's really vivid description of their life. But it quickly goes downhill, down, all the way to the F tier. It's a fail, it's bad. It's the only Orwell book I haven't actually finished. I just gave up on it. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. I think he's trying to get his head around socialism and figure out what exactly it is, and he doesn't really know, and it's loads of examples are specific to that time, so it's just really dated. He just completely drags, and it's just really not that interesting. Okay, so in short, I would recommend, if I'm assuming a lot of people are going to have read 1984 and Animal Farm, and if you're looking for something else to read, that's Orwell. I would definitely recommend Down and Out, and plus the 3 books in the A column, and yeah, Homage to Catalonia as well. It's not bad. It's just not as good as those others, and I would give the other 2 a miss, to be fair. I mean, if you have read all the ones in the sea, then yeah, why not give Coming Up for Air a try? Interesting thing about Coming Up for Air is you could argue it's kind of a prequel to 1984. It could be the same character. It could be set in the same kind of universe. You know, some of the themes are... It's kind of a warning about what's going to come. He's quite concerned about what's coming up after the Second World War, even though it's set before it, but he can see it happening and he can see it finishing, and he's concerned about what's going to happen after it. So it could be considered a kind of a prequel to 1984. So, yeah, it's not too bad, but it's definitely not as good as the other books up there. Right, that's the end of the Orwell tier list. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of the rankings or any of the comments I've made about the books. Okay, adios, bye.